Welcome back to the Healthy Funnel Podcast. I am so freaking excited for this episode. This is one I've been wanting to do forever. If you listen to me on podcasts and you listen to Alex and I, you know Alex is the hype guy. But for this episode, I am so hyped up for our guest. This is someone who I just think is such an inspiration for what's possible in healthcare as a provider and what you can do. Alex, we've got Jen Crane on the show, the Cirque Physio. How excited are you for this one?
I can't believe that we actually got her on the show. I just can't believe she would take time out of her day to come do this for it. Jen, thank you so much for coming on here today.
Absolutely. You guys were such a huge help. And of course, my dog is now sticking her head in the frame because she's like, oh, you're recording? Let's do this. You guys were so helpful for me, like when I was getting started with all of my online stuff, that I'm super happy to come in and chat with you guys. So this is great. Dog's coughing into the computer.
We have had cats on the podcast. We've had dogs. I think one time we've definitely had kids on podcasts before.
All the time.
Lots of fire alarms have gone off, which has been crazy. Jen, I got to say, we're so incredibly excited. We can't take much credit because you built an incredible audience, which I want to talk about today because you've been working your butt off. And I think there's something really incredible behind this, which we're going to get into, which is I think there's a lot of mystery behind, well, how do I become this influential person online? Can I just make 3 Instagram posts and all of a sudden make $1 million and then leave my job? It's got to be that easy. Mm-hmm. Your story is so much more authentic and real than that story of what we seem to see. But for people who don't know you, Jen, you're a physical therapist who has turned into the Cirque Physio. Do you mind taking us back when you first got out of PT school, what you thought you'd be doing over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so when I graduated from PT school, I probably would have been voted least likely in my class to ever start a business or work for myself. I wanted to be a worker bee in a sports clinic or working with a sports team in kind of like an athletic training PT role. My background was in athletic training, so I knew I wanted to work with sports, but I was also pretty happy working in a clinic. So I was just gearing up for a life of that, which in hindsight, I'm like, what was I thinking? But I just didn't know anything else was available. So I graduated. I did an orthopedic residency right off the bat. And then I kind of hopped around with a few different jobs. I did travel PT for a while. I worked as a researcher teacher at Army Baylor DPT program. I kind of hopped around a lot in different settings, always related to ortho and sports, but kind of again, a little bit more non-traditional. I only worked in a true clinic for probably 6 months as a travel PT. And then I was like, this is not my jam after all. So, I ended up, when I was living in Texas with the Army Baylor PT program, I was like, I need a hobby. I have some extra time on my hands. I'm not working 60-hour work weeks. I need a hobby. So I found a rock climbing gym that was really close to my house and walked in, and there were a few students doing aerial silks, which is a type of aerial apparatus in circus arts. And I have a background in ballet and in dancing, and I was like, that's super cool. I want to do that. And basically just kind of dove into the world of circus and acrobatics and hand balancing and aerial arts. And just really fell in love with it on a personal level, and then ended up getting really involved in it and kind of hit the ceiling of what I could do in Texas. It was not a huge circus community there, and I knew that I really wanted to pursue this, maybe not professionally, but a little bit more seriously. So I ended up moving to San Francisco, which is where I realized that all of my fellow circus art students were always injured, and nobody ever went to see a PT for it. And I was like, why you have a shoulder injury? That's what PTs do, right? And they were like, no, the last time I went to see a PT, they just told me that, they tested me and said that I was strong enough and flexible enough, and they didn't know what to do with me, so just stop training. And so they're all really fearful to go to see a healthcare provider about it because nobody knows what to do with them. And I felt that I was a bit more uniquely positioned to help them with kind of my background and my knowledge. And working with different sports teams on a more mainstream level, but I also really liked the concept of you having to use my brain to think through how to treat these patients, because we don't learn about it in any, there's no continuing education or education at all for treating this population. And I really enjoyed thinking outside of the box with how to figure out what to do with them. So I just like finally, after months, the first couple months in San Francisco, I was like, fine, I'll open a practice. I really don't want to do this. I hate business, finance, all of that stuff. Just really dislike it. So I like pretty much went kicking and screaming into my little cash-based practice at the time, rented space from the circus center where I was training at, and just everything was super easy, cash-based, out of network with insurance, made it as simple as possible. Yeah, so that's kind of how I got started in the circus world. And it's continued to evolve, over the past now like 5 years, 5 years, to now I'm training circus full time, living in San Diego, kind of hopping around, and yeah.
So, hey, that is such a cool story of, hey, I didn't think that I would have any interest in this. I was even resistant to it when I first started, and want to skip a few. Now I joined the circuit. Like you have such a cool story, but I think that what you've done, I mean, you mentioned this has been a long process. This isn't like you just popped up overnight and all of a sudden you were the world's leading expert on circus performance arts and rehab. How did you decide to go from, hey, I've got some interest in this, I'll even start a practice, to, I'm confident enough to start posting online about this?
Yeah.
Where did that transition come in for you?
So that actually happened out of sheer boredom. I had been living in San Francisco and practicing in my new clinic for about a year, and I got a job offer to move to China for a year, or 6 months to a year, to work with the Chinese Olympic teams as their head physio, or not head physio, as one of the physios for all of their teams. So I was like, that seems pretty cool. I'd like to work with Olympic athletes. China can't be that bad. So I ended up in China working with the sports teams out there, and it was a lot of sitting and watching ping pong practice, weightlifting practice, diving practice, some of which were more entertaining than others. So I was kind of removed from my main population for a prolonged period of time, and I was like, how do I keep myself entertained? How do I stay relevant to this population? How can I keep kind of helping them? And I was like, well, I guess I could start a blog and maybe turn my Instagram, which was at the time just me chronicling my journey in circus. I was like, I guess I could start posting educational content on there and just see what happens. And so I started a blog and just kind of talked about the things that I saw the most often in circus. So I talked a lot about shoulder injuries and how to prevent shoulder injuries, and kind of the common themes that I saw amongst the artists that I worked with, the issues of flexibility and range of motion and whatever. And at the time, there was really no one in the circus world that was trying to do that, to educate people about how to protect their bodies so that they can continue to train. No one that was kind of positioned with the educational background that I had. And that I think was able to speak their language. So once I started that, it just took off. I mean, spread like wildfire. People were just sharing all my content and tagging me in things. And I was like, holy smokes, this is crazy. So by the time I left China, I had a decent following. And then I continued that when I got back to San Francisco and continued working in my practice. And yeah, then I really kind of put my nose in the grindstone and was like, okay, I'm going to turn this into a thing. So I would post on my blog pretty regularly. I would, my Instagram kind of turned it into what it basically is now, which is a couple posts of me showing my training progression and, trying to do things in the air. And then a couple educational posts on, okay, this is how you can work on wrist mobility for hand balancing, or, whatever it is that my population is interested in. Yeah, so that's kind of how I started developing a following, but it's definitely been a really I mean, it's been over the past 5 years, so it's not at all been an overnight thing, although it took off pretty quickly. So I was a little bit lucky there, and everything was just very organic. Like I just didn't know that this was possible. Nobody really talks about it in PT, that you can do something like this, be an online educator. So yeah, it was really cool to see how that evolved. And now I'm like, wow, I love my life. This is so cool. Look at what I fell into.
Well, let's say what you've worked your way into.
Yeah. What I saw and then went after.
Yeah. And guys, if you're listening to this and you're curious, Jen has 43,000 followers on Instagram right now. It's Cirque_Physio, CRIQUE_Physio. You got to follow her if you're interested in doing stuff online. We're going to talk more about it, but absolutely go follow her. Just what you've been building over time. Jen, I have to ask, just out of pure curiosity, it's not really what I wanted to, or thought we'd go down, but how on earth did you even get the opportunity to go to China? Like, how did they find you? Was this because of what you're doing online? Was this someone knew someone? Just curious how that opportunity came about.
A colleague that I worked with in Connecticut knew about the job opening, and he was like, hey, I see that you're working with a really bizarre population in circus. I know you like traveling. I know you worked with sports in the past. Like, are you interested? And I was like, yeah, totally. And so he connected me, and
Wow.
had a couple interviews, and then, which were all at like 1 a.m. because it was China time. So I was like, I can do this. I can be like, but yeah, then they were like, okay, well, can you start in 2 weeks? And I was like, sure. Yeah.
That's incredible. So just having a network really helped out. It sounds like someone knew someone, thought of you, and I just think it's a really powerful lesson, no matter whether online, in person, that continuing to build your network. I think it's the biggest thing that you can do just to create opportunities. So thank you for sharing that story, because I was really curious, like how I'm always fascinated by how some of these opportunities come about. But I want to dive back in a little bit, Jen. So you're bored, you're in China, if the Chinese government's listening, you're super involved in your work, but also wanted an extracurricular activity, because we know that they listen to our podcast often. Just kidding. So you had some time on your hands. Just take us through, like, clearly you have no expectation of this going anywhere at this point in terms of building a business out of it. What's going through your mind? Because I think so many people go in with expectations of, well, I want to grow a following. I want to have 10,000 followers on Instagram, or a blog that's read by everyone. I just would love to know where your head was at. And I think, just curious, was it just, hey, what can I give to my community? What can I do? Or did you have some expectations that maybe we just haven't talked about before?
Yeah. At that point, I didn't have a ton of expectations. Again, I just didn't know what I could do with it. But I do remember, after I'd started the blog, I think I really started the blog just to be like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing all of these very common things in circus that if people knew about, not to do this or to do this, it would make a huge impact on their injury status, their performance abilities, all these things. So it really did start out with me being like, I just need to share this information. How can I get it out there while I can't be physically helping people? But then after that, I started getting a bunch of requests for like what circus artists call like online lessons, which is fairly common in the circus world to do, like if you live somewhere remote, to do like Skype lessons with a circus instructor or something along those lines, just so that you can have something to work on. So I started getting requests for that, and then I was like, oh, this is telehealth. and then I started kind of pursuing that and looking into the legalities involved and everything. And I actually did my first telehealth session in China, in like this dinky little hotel room when I was traveling with the diving team, with a circus artist in Australia. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like, I can work with people all over the place, because circus artists' biggest complaint are that people don't get us. Healthcare providers don't understand. So if I can have this option, I can work with people everywhere. And I was like, this is awesome. So then once I got back from China, I started to push telehealth, and that took off. Again, once kind of word of mouth got out, and this was still like so far before I even knew Facebook ads existed. So this was all like very more organic, word of mouth, Instagram, Facebook. Kind of all of that. So I kind of rolled with telehealth for a little bit once I got back to San Francisco. So I was doing that and then working with patients in person too at my clinic at Circus Center. Yeah.
Wow. So you get to this point then where you're having success in it, clearly. You're enjoying it. And then how did you find, you mentioned, you didn't know anything about Facebook ads. You were doing all of this organically. How did you start to fall into like, oh, I should maybe be like marketing digital? How did you get into that realm of things?
Yeah. So I think, after that, I got back from China, and another thing that's very common in the circus community is to travel and teach workshops. And this is just like pretty ingrained in this culture that, if you live in a kind of big city, there will often be instructors circling through teaching and doing that. And I was like, I would like to do that. Like, I want to travel more. So I started offering that and being like, hey, if you have a studio and want to host me for workshops, let me know, and like we can set that up. And so I did that for a bit and still didn't know about marketing. But then when I really started at least wanting to learn about marketing was after I published, I guess, the first ebook that I started selling. So I made ebooks for safe flexibility training because this was a thing that I saw as something very common in this world, that people got injured because they didn't know how to stretch properly, and they want these extreme ranges of motion. But the only reason that I even thought to create the ebooks was because my dog got sick. So she, when a little bit after I got back from China, she got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that was very expensive to treat. And so I had all of these vet bills, and I was like, I cannot pay these vet bills. And here she comes again. She knows I'm talking about her. I was like, I can't pay these vet bills on my telehealth, and like I don't have enough hours in the week to live in San Francisco, continue training as a circus artist, and pay my vet bills, and I don't want to give any of those things up. So how do I make this work? And then I was like, I talk a lot about flexibility. I give workshops on flexibility. This would be a pretty easy thing to transition into writing. So I made my first ebook. I think once I figured out that I wanted to do that, it took me about a week of literally just sitting at my computer and writing out content and filming stuff in my living room, and just nose to the grindstone for a week, and then had it done. Hired someone to make the cover page out of a photo, and then did that. And then at this point I still didn't know about Facebook ads, but I had a decent Instagram following at that point. I think I had maybe 10,000 followers at that point. So I was like, hey guys, I just published this thing. If you want to buy it, go to the link in my bio. I was still so awkward about selling things and marketing at all, that I was like, if you're interested, maybe you could check it out. And I remember I published it one evening, and then the next morning I woke up and I looked at my sales overnight, and I was like, I just paid rent.
In San Francisco rent.
In San Francisco rent. And I was like, oh my God. And that was the first moment when I was like, I could probably turn this into a thing. And yeah, and then I did that for a while. And I think that's after I had published the ebook series and had been kind of trying to promote it. That's when I found you guys, and that's kind of where you came into the picture with Facebook ads and helping me out with that, and really taking everything just totally took off after that. So yeah.
Well, Jen, before we get into that, I think it's really important that we dive in a little bit. How long had you had your Instagram going and active, how often were you posting? Well, so first off, how often or how long had you had your Instagram going before you actually even created that ebook to sell something there?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I had let's see, so it was probably about a year
Okay.
of consistently posting. And this was when I was really on top of my blog, which was like long form educational content, really like just a ton of information.
Yeah.
So I'd had that going for about a year before I even kind of thought to do this, or before I had the incentive to do this. So people at that point, like, and looking back, I mean, that's kind of what you guys teach, right? Like you have to prove yourself as an expert in whatever field that you're trying to sell to. And honestly, like I still just really wanted to help people. So I'd proven that I knew what I was talking about. I'm positioned as an expert. I have a good educational background. And I'd been providing free content for a year. I definitely didn't have an email list at this point. So I wasn't even trying to get people's email addresses.
That's so cool. Jen, so I guess just curious off that, because people always ask, well, like, how did you do it? What was the secret sauce? What do you feel like were some keys to you? Obviously consistency is huge. And maybe you can touch on like, if you had a schedule for that, or if you had just any kind of internal process.
Yeah.
And then were there any other factors that helped you grow your either Instagram or blog?
Yeah, definitely. I think that in retrospect, something that was really helpful and still I think is helpful is I always show who I am as a person on my social media, and people really underscore they don't really talk about the importance of this. But one of the first things that almost everybody that I work with says is like, oh my gosh, you do what I do. Like, you're so relatable. And you talked about when you had a shoulder injury and what that was like and how you dealt with it. And you're posting like you're doing all of the circus stuff too. So they trust me on a more personal level, that like, I get it. And I understand that it's not acceptable to just tell them to rest forever. So I think showing your personality and who you are is really important. And that's kind of like, I mean, my Instagram, it's very clear I'm fairly transparent with who I am as a person in real life on Instagram. So I think that that's really important, because people aren't going to want to invest in time or money in a product that you're providing if they're like, who is this like person who just has no personality and is just trying to push a product? Like, nobody's interested in that. So that's definitely something that I didn't know I was doing right, but now I'm aware of and try to always keep a bit of that in my social media. And then, yeah, consistency I think is really important as well. I've never had a schedule. I don't use like the scheduling apps. A lot of people do and have a ton of success with it, but just the way that kind of my personality is, I don't do really well with like batch creating content and then just dripping it out. I'm like, oh, I did this cool thing on Trapeze today, I'm going to post this. And like, oh, this guy I just worked with has wrist issues. Let me take a video of this really quick and then I'll post this on my Instagram as an educational thing. I am consistent with posting. Now I post less. I probably post like three times a week-ish. But it's been, I did post every day for a really long time. That's really helpful with the algorithms and such. But yeah, I think consistency and providing something that isn't too dense. I think that was something, especially on Instagram, if Instagram is your main market, like there's a word count for the captions. You can't go crazy. I think there's a real value in distilling information to the key points, making it come across in a clear manner, and then just like letting people ask questions from there. Because then you can turn it into a whole dialogue in the comments, and then that boosts your visibility on Instagram because people are commenting and engaging. And yeah, so I think those are my main strategies.
But Jen, I thought this was passive income.
I know, right?
You have to actually talk to people?
Yeah.
So we get this question all the time, and I'm sure you have too. How did you decide what to sell people versus what to give away? And this is something that we chuckle at it now, being on the other side of it. But when you're in the throes of it and trying to decide, oh, what do I create for someone? How did you decide, okay, what do I put in these ebooks versus what I've given out for free in my blogs? How did you make that call early on?
That's so hard. It's such a hard thing to grapple with initially. But I think what I personally kind of came down to as the deciding factor is putting this up for free going to make my life easier? Like, is this a question that I get so often that I'm just so sick of answering? Like, is this something that I literally have a caption that I copy paste when people ask me the question? And for me, that was what it kind of came down to. And that's what my blog is it's just like the most common, most basic questions that just makes my life easier to be able to be like, go read my blog, here's the link. And then the stuff that I give away for free, but like in exchange for your email, is a little bit more in depth than that. But I think my freebie that I've had for a really long time is like my top 5 exercises for circus artists. And it's like a couple shoulder exercises, couple hip exercises, couple like upper back exercises. But it's also got like a lot of information as to the rationale behind it. And there is an educational component to it, but it's much shorter than my ebooks. And then my current flexibility program. But yeah, it's kind of like my purpose for that is I want to show them that I can give you a lot more information, a lot more detailed information than I can give you on my social media. There's some really good exercises that look easy, but then they try them and they're like, why can't I do this? Oh my gosh. I wonder, like, if I can't do this, if this is really hard for me, then what else do I not know that I need? So I think that's the purpose of the freebie that I give away in exchange for an email, is to continue to prove them, like, I know my stuff and I know you. Like, I see you and your lack of shoulder mobility. I see how you cheat with your low back with everything. Like, it's kind of like, that's the purpose of that content. So.
I love it. I love it. And so it's really interesting, as Alex and I have been doing this more and more, we've come to realize too how often people want to pay for structure in a organization, in a format. I'm not sure if you've seen that too, Jen. Like, a lot of times it's people will tell people, well, all the videos are there for free. You just have to go search for them. It's like, well, I'd rather just pay for organized and structured in a way that I can follow it versus do all that myself. And I'd love to ask you this question, Jen. I'm kind of setting you up, and I'd be curious your answer. But if someone's out there and they're like, because we get this all the time, Jen, I have this idea and I want to sell this idea that I have. Would you recommend to someone to either go provide value first for a while and then see what they want, or try to sell that idea and go find the people to sell that idea to?
I think that, so I'm a person that's always really likes to work a little smarter than I work harder. So the second option sounds like a lot more effort to me. Like, you go through all this effort to create a product. Obviously, if you're doing this, you're probably a little bit of a perfectionist. So you're probably going to put a lot of time and energy into it. And then maybe people like it, maybe people don't. Or maybe you don't, maybe there just isn't a market for it. So, I mean, I obviously did the first of those options and it worked great for me. And from that, I could also be like, send out a survey monkey to the people who bought it and be like, what did you like? What do you want changed? What's your feedback? And any testimonials or reviews I can put on my website. So I think that there's definitely value to both, but it's always worked a little better for me to have a general idea of what people want. Or like, I've been working with this population. I see that everyone wants to get their splits. People get injured doing this a lot. So I'm going to put this out as like the first iteration and then see what people like. And that's really what I did with all my products. Was I started with ebooks, figured out what people wanted, and then adjusted as necessary. And again, like, a lot of like people they pay for organization. Like, here, do this. This is your program. So
yeah, it's so cool, and I really like that. Thinking about we're all perfectionists. And so if we're going to do something, we know that we're going to do it right. But I just love the approach that you've taken of, I just want to serve people. And so I'm going to help people. And in the process, I grow a following, and then I look for gaps in where they're not being served, and I create something that fills that gap that they're telling me that they have. You've just done it such a smart way. And I want to ask, how do you continue to choose pricing for yourself? And I know that everyone has a completely different, market, and they have different needs. And we've talked about this at length in terms of how do we choose our pricing, but how have you chosen pricing, and what would you do differently with that now that you know how
Oh
it goes?
my gosh. Yeah. This was like the most angsty part of the whole thing, I think, is figuring out a price structure. Honestly, I feel like, obviously I did some market research when I did my first ebooks to see like are there other ebooks in performing arts out there with like, whether it's from like aerial coaches or flexibility coaches, what do people have out there? How does my product compare? I bought a lot of the products that were out there just to see, and I was like, oh, mine is way better than this. I can definitely at least charge this much. Or like, wow, they have a lot more content. Maybe I should adjust. But yeah, I did the research, and then I kind of was like, okay, how much work did I put into this? And then I kind of just picked a number from that and went with it. And I think for all of the ebooks, like they were all priced between $75 and $100, which was definitely on the higher end of my market for what people will pay for that. So I did that, and then I would have these sales, right? So 20% off of, those prices. And I think another thing too that I'm learning as I'm continuing to price things is what's the least amount of money that I can charge for something and not be resentful about it? Because that's something that I see, especially a lot in this world, and the circus community, is like for workshops, and especially for things where like, if I'm figuring out a price for a one-on-one appointment or for a workshop, that's my actual time every time. So what's the least amount that I would not be resentful spending my time doing that? Because I don't want to do something and just be annoyed that I'm spending time doing that. So I start there, and then what would I be super stoked on for like the upper end? And then, try to find something in the middle based on your market. And obviously if I'm doing workshops in like Texas, the market's a lot different there than it is in San Francisco or in New York City. So adjust within that. But I think that that's something that worked really well for me, and what I've kind of continued to do. And also like how much content is in there, and what are they actually getting from it? So, but it's hard. It sucks.
Well, I think the great thing is it's clearly worked out for you. And I want to just clue people in, Jen, who may not know kind of how this has played out for you the last couple of years and what you've been able to do. So for people who are listening, right, you started out on this journey where you were going to be a sports ortho PT, did not want to have a practice, kind of worked your way into these situations that present themselves. You're like, hey, I got to do something to help these people. So you started practice, and then Bella gets sick, and you've got to create a product, which is just cool how all this comes from usually a story, some type of pressure, like whether not negative or positive, just like some type of thing, external force causes you to take action. And it's led to this. Since you released your first ebook, what have you been able to do with your career, and what are you doing now?
Yeah, totally. So with all the ebooks, as I kind of dripped them out over probably a 6-month period of time, I think I had 4 at the end. I think it was a 4-part series. So I had the 4 ebooks, and as I continued to sell those and have the different sales a few times per year, I was like, I don't actually have to see patients full time anymore. If I wasn't seeing patients full time anymore, I could train more, and then maybe I could start performing, which is something that I was really interested in. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have another sale, but this time I'm going to work really hard at it, and I'm going to do the Facebook ads thing. And I think that's when I started or when I first started like knowing about you guys and like, oh, this is really cool. They have some really good information. And then I started getting more invested in that, and I was traveling a ton. And that was another thing too. Like, I was like, oh, I could travel a lot more. I don't have to be bound to the just seeing patients for money. And then I was just like, wait, hold on. Is this allowing me, is this way of working and educating people, this is allowing me to actually do whatever I want, pretty much, like, or see that that's a possibility. And then I was like, okay, well, if I could do whatever, if money wasn't an issue, what would I want my life to look like? And just even thinking that that might be a possibility, I was like mind blown. So then I started being like, okay, I can do this. And then, I mean, when I have an idea and decide I want to work on something, I think like a lot of us, I fixate on it and I'm like, okay, let's do this. So yeah, then I was just like, okay, I want to train a lot more. I want to perform, and I want to travel. And how do I make that happen? And then over the course of, I think probably about a year, I started working with you guys, and oh my gosh, like you guys were such game changers. I mean, such game changers. And how I use Facebook ads, how I sell things, how like just my income, you guys made a huge difference in that. So like that was just so cool to learn so much from you guys and see how that totally changed everything. So yeah, then now fast forward however many years later, I don't have my ebooks anymore. I kind of retired those. I have this new like crazy giant customized flexibility program called MyFlex that basically is based around this self-assessment that people go through and they assess their like head to toe flexibility, submit results of their self-assessment, and then me and my team generates them a customized program that's like a follow along video that they just like hit play on, and it's customized to their body, full body flexibility. So that's like my product now. And I launched that 3 months ago. But before that launch, I was like, okay, if this goes well, like if this launch goes well, then I'm basically going to quit working, seeing patients, and train circus full time. And it went really well. And so I was like, all right, joining the circus. So now I am still, that program I put out, or I like open for enrollment a few times a year. And in between, I like right now I live in San Diego. I will have been here for 3 months by the time I leave, working with a couple specific coaches here. And then I'll go to Montreal for 3 to 6 months to train with some other coaches up there. It's kind of like the circus mecca trip that every circus artist takes, is the trip to Montreal. So I'll do that. And I mean, obviously I still get suckered into working with people on a pretty regular basis, which I love. I mean, I don't know that I could ever actually give up working with people one-on-one, because I love it. I just don't want to do it for 40 to 60 hours a week. So yeah, that's kind of what my life looks like now. And it's much more like an online education platform. And then I have like a Facebook community group for everybody who has my program. So I'm very involved in that and working with people there. So that's my crazy circus life, which I never could have seen coming.
Jen, I just have to say, you're such a rock star badass in my mind. Like really, it's so cool to think of, cause age certainly doesn't matter, but it's not like you're 19 trying to make a circus arts career happen, right? And all of this is happening. Like you're actually creating something that frees you up in time to go still pursue something that you love, that you could take a chance with. That I think about for myself, like if I was working 50, 60 hours a week in a clinic, the other things I'd have to sacrifice and give up to pursue something like a circus arts training or career, right, would be family time, time with friends, right? And these things that something's got to give. And you've created a lifestyle where you can still pursue this and and continue to chase after things, which I think is ultimately the dream for so many of us, is to still feel alive. I guess I'd love to ask you, how alive do you feel right now? It's kind of a silly question. But how alive do you feel compared to maybe like 10 years ago or 5 years ago?
Yeah, I'm so happy. Like, I am just so happy with my life and my work and training, and it's just awesome. I never would have pictured, I never thought that this was an option to even want this. And now that I am here, I could never see myself going back and working for a clinic or working with a boss, I think, because I don't know, it's pretty awesome working for yourself and telling your thoughts, and I'm so happy, and just to be able to have the freedom to be like, well, yeah, this summer I'm going to go to Montreal, and like, I don't know what I'm going to do after that. I don't know what I'm going to want to do after that. Like, maybe I'll want to stay in Montreal and I'll just be there for a while. Maybe I'll want to come back to San Diego or move to Portland or travel for a little. Like, it's so nice to just be able to know that my business I can do from anywhere. I mean, I can generate income that I can sustain my life on and pay off my student loans with, and give my dog a better life, you know?
Let's be real. Bella's the real boss. We know
She's the real boss. She has a backyard right now, and she's pretty excited about that. So.
Whoa.
Yeah. Then what is your, super curious, because we don't, it's only recent. There's been kind of this new wave of online healthcare entrepreneur. Any resistance to friends and family, like, for you doing this? Were they still confused? Because, like, I know my family's like, what do you do? Like, why?
Yeah. Okay. It's no resistance. It's a lot of confusion. Especially because, like, people will ask me what I do, and I'm like,
Instagram?
I'm a physical therapist, but I don't treat patients. I'm an acrobat. I also am an educator. Like, I teach. I also, like, social media is really, it's just such a confusing. So half the time, if I'm like in an Uber or something, I'm like, I'm an accountant.
Which is part of your job, probably still. Yeah, you're still probably. Yeah.
No way, I hire an accountant.
What a cool thing, though, too. Right? Like, you could hire the people that can do things that you don't want to do in your business now.
Oh my gosh, it's awesome. Which was so hard. I mean, I'm sure, like, that when you get to the point where you have to hire someone, you're like, this is terrifying. This is my business. This is my brain baby. I never will trust anyone with this. But then you hire someone and you're like, this is pretty great. And then you're just like, delegate, 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 delegate.
Do I even have to do anything anymore?
Right.
We might have to have a whole episode of you like just talking Alex and us through delegating, how you delegate. But it's so cool to me, Jen, that what you've built, what you're doing. I really love that you said you're an educator, because I don't know why. It makes so much sense, but you really think about, other than your hands-on moments of therapy, really what we're doing is educating and coaching, and I think the two are just different ways of sort of saying the same thing. And really look at what is our biggest asset. And I'm a firm believer it's what we know. It's our knowledge, right? Like there are plenty of people out there who don't use their hands, ever put their hands on patients, and still make a huge difference. And I think both are incredibly important, but to look at, if that were taken away from you tomorrow, you could not put your hands on patients for some reason, you could continue your business and impacting people all over the world, which is just so cool. And I don't know why it hasn't clicked in the last 2-3 years, but just that's what you do. You are an incredible educator of people.
And that's what I think, that as PTs, we're so well positioned. And that's what we do half the time anyways, if you're working in a clinic, is just teach people about their bodies, about how to take care of their bodies. And I think that we don't really connect that dot often, but we're such good educators, and why not take what we're already teaching people and apply it to a larger group or to social media, or, it's like, we're already good at it if we're PTs, hopefully. Like, why not leverage that? But
how can you make someone else money doing that, Jen?
Right? I know. Yeah.
That's my one rack I'll throw today.
How would you want to? What would you want to help someone else make money doing that? That's the question. Maybe if you have a good boss.
There you go. So Jen, as we wrap up, someone is listening to this right now who is exactly where you were at like 4 or 5 years ago. They feel like they want to do something a little bit different with their life. They just heard your story and are absolutely inspired. They're like, oh my gosh, I want Jen's life. What would you tell to someone who's just at the beginning of this journey, who's totally overwhelmed, maybe now sees a vision of sort of what they could accomplish, but has no clue the path to get there? Specifically, what skills or what things would you say that they need to focus on? Mm-hmm. And, you know, kind of looking back, what are the things that mattered for you over the past few years? And what are the things that really didn't in building what you built?
For sure. I think that definitely will depend on so many things, but really when you're just getting started, what are you super stoked about? Like, what are you so excited to talk about and to work with people on and to teach people? And what do people need? I mean, what I really like, this whole time, all I've wanted to do is help people and to teach people about how to not get hurt. So what makes you super excited? What would you wake up every morning and be super happy to do? And what do people need, and how, like, how can you help people? And I think that that's like learning about that and just putting content out there that you are passionate about. People can see that. And it's so funny because like sometimes I'll post on Instagram and I'm like, oh, I'm posting just to post. This is just like a throwaway post, like a filler, and I'm not excited about it. And like often it doesn't do well because I'm not super excited about it. So I think like figure out what you're excited to do and then do it and then see what people want. And I don't know, I think it's a long game. It's definitely a marathon. So just hang in there, talk to your audience, ask what they want, interact with them, like show that you're a human, and then just see what happens, because you can plan to an extent, but also so many things will come up that you're like, I never knew that you guys needed this and that I am properly positioned to help you with this. So just I think to be open to possibilities and not have such strict deadlines and goals is helpful.
Wow. You just so beautifully summarized everything that we feel like is so important for people who are just starting out. And I just love that advice of find what you love and then find how you can help people with that thing that you love. And it's just such a perfect marriage of your skill set, your passions with a need in the marketplace, you know, from the marketing speak, as we call it.
Definitely. And then like, once you kind of get the ball rolling there, like, what do you want? I think that's really important too. Like, why are you doing this? I was working with a friend of mine who I don't actually know what her job title is, but she was kind of helping me think through like, what do I want with this current flexibility program? And she was like, some of the things that she asked that I thought was really interesting was she had 3 different kind of areas. And the first one was like, what are you as your company, as your brand? Why do you exist? What are you trying to solve? And like globally, what do you want? And then more specifically this, because it was when I was working on MyFlex, she was like, what does this product need to solve? Like, what are the goals of this product? What is it working towards? How is it going to help people? And then the last one was, what do you get out of it? And I think that's so important because like, if you don't get anything out of it, or if you're not doing what you actually want to do, what are you doing? So like, don't forget that like, you can be selfish with this, right? Like, write out what you want. Like, what are your goals? I want to train with the circus full time. I want to perform. Like, that's okay. I want, the independence to be I want to be location independent. So I think that like thinking about those 3 things is really interesting to me. And I think it was a really helpful exercise for me to just broaden kind of how I think about my company and how it affects me and kind of my demographic. So yeah.
Man, I absolutely love that. I think it's such an important part too, because if you don't love it and aren't getting something out of it, you might be able to stick with it for a while, but I think the odds of you staying with it go down dramatically. I don't really have evidence for that, but I think that, it's probably pretty safe to say it's hard to stick with it. Jen, I just want to say that it is so humbling to know you and to get to spend time with you and to watch you grow and see you continue to chase after the things that you chase after. It's truly an inspiration. I really, really mean that. Like, I'm inspired when I watch you on Instagram to think, what do I want to keep going after when I see you doing that? I want to give you a chance to let people know where they can keep up with you if they want to learn more about you, if they want to reach out to you, whether that's through circus arts or just kind of how you've built your business. How can people keep up with you? How can they learn more about you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Instagram is my main jam. So definitely on Instagram, I'm Cirque, CIRQE _ Physio, PHYSIO. Yeah, I'm very active on there. And then all of the info for how to contact me, if like anyone has any other questions, is all through the Instagram kind of contact button and all of that. So yeah, I love chatting. I love chatting with other PTs because they're not my main demographic. So it's always really fun to be like, oh, you're a PT too. This is so fun and different for me.
Gosh, what a great lesson too. If you're out there and you're a PT and you want to serve a community, it's not going to help you to have a whole audience of PTs. Go after the people who you want to help and who you want to serve, which is a very important thing that seems to be overlooked. But Jen, we just deeply from the bottom of our hearts want to say thank you so much, and Bella too, for jumping on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm super happy to chat.
Guys, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode of the Healthy Funnel Podcast. If you're curious, go check out Jen at Cirque _ Physio on Instagram. And as always, have an awesome day. Alex and I will catch you on the next episode.